Tonight, there is nothing waiting for you. No task unfinished, no place you need to reach. Only a slow settling of thought, as the world grows quieter and the mind is allowed to drift, unobserved, into another time. The people who sailed from the northern coasts did not think of themselves as fragile. They did not cultivate caution, and they did not admire restraint. From childhood, they were taught that hesitation was a flaw to be corrected, and fear was something other people felt. Their stories were filled with men who rode into storms without complaint, who stepped into violence as if it were a familiar room, who met death with an expression meant to be remembered. To die well was considered an achievement. To die quietly, unnoticed, was not. Their world was built around the idea that the future was fixed. Fate had already decided the shape of a life, the moment of its ending, and the manner in which it would close. If that was true, then worrying served no purpose. You could not avoid what was coming, so you might as well move toward it with confidence. This belief simplified things. When something stood in the way, you attacked it. When someone resisted, you overpowered them. When the outcome was unfavorable, you explained it later as bad luck, trickery, or someone else's mistake. In their own telling, fear rarely appeared. It was edited out, smoothed over, or replaced with humor and bravado. Kings were mocked, enemies insulted, defeats reframed as temporary inconveniences. Fortified towns were treated as obstacles, not warnings. Even loss was narrated loudly, because noise itself was proof of confidence, which is why the silences matter. In a few places, the stories slow down. The language becomes less precise. Names appear once and are not repeated. Journeys are mentioned without detail and then quietly avoided. There are no speeches, no heroic deaths, no triumphant returns, just absence. And for a culture that filled every moment with words, absence was unsettling. These were people who crossed seas with little more than wood, wool, and conviction. They fought armored soldiers with axes and optimism. They believed destiny could not be dodged, so consequences were rarely discussed. Yet there were lands they approached carefully, and others they avoided entirely. Routes shifted. Ships turned earlier than expected. The change was subtle, but it persisted. It was not that they feared fighting. Fighting was familiar. Fighting had rules. You could see the enemy, count them, measure the risk, and decide whether the effort was worthwhile. Even a bad fight made sense. Someone struck, someone blocked, someone fell. The logic of violence was clean. What unsettled them was the absence of that logic. There were places where nothing announced itself, where no army stood waiting, where no village offered itself as a target. Just forest, snow, and a sense of being observed without being seen. A landing would be made, men would move inland, and the world would refuse to respond properly. No scouts appeared, no challenge was issued. Instead, tracks vanished. Sounds behaved strangely. Arrows arrived without warning and left without explanation. This was irritating in a way few things were. Their weapons were heavy, designed for open ground. Their armor worked best when movement was clear and space was generous. In dense forest and uneven snow, all of it became exhausting. Each step required effort. Each sound felt too loud. Strength, which usually solved problems quickly, stopped being useful. They did not call this fear. They called it frustration. But frustration lingered, and frustration changed behavior. The world they preferred was one that cooperated. Coastlines, rivers, open fields. Places where ships could wait and crews could move with confidence. The farther inland they traveled, the less cooperative things became. Directions blurred. Landmarks disappeared. The sky flattened into a uniform gray that offered no guidance. Progress slowed to a crawl. Beyond the edge of their certainty lived people who did not stay in one place. People whose homes moved, whose wealth traveled with them, whose knowledge was tied to seasons rather than structures. They did not build towns to surround or fields to seize. They did not wait to be found. They appeared when they wished and were gone before questions could be formed. To those who arrived expecting targets, this was deeply unsettling. Trade happened, but it happened quietly. Travelers moved carefully, often with guides. Voices were lower. Time was not wasted. No one wandered off alone. These were small changes, but for people who normally announced themselves loudly, they mattered. The land itself seemed indifferent to visitors. Snow absorbed sound until even shouting felt pointless. Forests closed around movement, narrowing vision and dulling orientation. Cold punished mistakes immediately. Sweat turned against you. Clothing betrayed you. Metal slowed you down. Meanwhile, those who belonged there moved as if nothing were wrong. They stepped where the ground held firm. They knew when sound would carry and when it would disappear. They understood weather not as an obstacle, but as information. To outsiders, this looked like something else entirely. When conditions turned suddenly, explanations followed. Storms arrived at the wrong moment. Fog thickened without warning. Paths led nowhere. Men became lost while walking confidently forward. In a world already filled with spirits and unseen forces, coincidence did not feel convincing. Some spoke of curses, others of hidden knowledge. The word used mattered less than the conclusion. Whatever was happening could not be challenged directly. You could not strike it. You could not shout at it. You could not make it behave. Belief spread faster than certainty ever could. Once one man suspected something was wrong, others noticed every delay, every stumble, every misstep. Bad luck stopped feeling random. The land itself seemed involved. Stories returned without trophies. Men came home quieter than they left. Details were avoided. Explanations were vague. Questions went unanswered. Silence settled where boasting should have been, and that silence lingered in long houses and around fires. No announcement was made. No fear was declared. Instead, habits shifted. Routes changed. Plans adjusted. Certain journeys were postponed indefinitely, which was another way of saying they would not happen. Fear did not roar. It whispered, and everyone listened. And slowly, without admitting it, attention moved elsewhere. The ships did not stop sailing. They simply sailed in different directions. As the quiet of the northern forests fades, it does not disappear all at once. Thins gradually, like breath cooling in the dark. The sense of being watched loosens, and another kind of stillness takes its place, softer, closer, and closer to the ground. There are nights when the air carries the weight of many small movements. Not hurried ones, not dramatic ones. Just the steady motion of ordinary lives continuing after daylight has withdrawn. In the narrow streets of a large city, lanterns are lit not for beauty, but because work is still being done. Oil burns with a low patience. Paper shades glow unevenly, casting light that does not travel far. The city settles into itself rather than falling silent. Wooden shutters are drawn partway closed, not to shut the world out, but to soften it. Footsteps move along packed earth and worn stone. They are unremarkable, blending together into a constant background rhythm. No one is in a hurry. No one expects to be remembered for what they are doing. Along the street, simple structures lean slightly inward, as if listening. Their surfaces are darkened by years of smoke and rain. Roof tiles hold the warmth of the day a little longer, releasing it slowly into the cooling air. Between these buildings, small fires are already burning, carefully tended, shielded from drafts. The smell arrives before the sight of it. Warm broth, Rice steamed until it holds together without effort. Oil heated just enough to release its scent, not enough to crackle loudly. Food prepared here is not meant to impress. It is meant to be eaten regularly by people who will return again tomorrow and the night after that. A vendor adjusts a pot, shifting it a few inches closer to the flame. The movement is practiced, barely noticed. Another wipes a surface clean, not because it is dirty, but because this is what comes next in the sequence of tasks. Hands move slowly. Nothing is rushed because rushing would only invite mistakes. Customers arrive without ceremony. They do not announce themselves. They step into the light, exchange a few quiet words, and wait. The waiting is familiar. It is not uncomfortable. It is simply part of the rhythm of the night. Steam lifts gently, then disappears. Bowls are passed from one set of hands to another. Coins change places with a soft sound that is almost lost beneath everything else. Someone eats standing, another crouches nearby. Another carries their meal away to be finished elsewhere. No one lingers longer than needed, but no one is hurried away. Above them, the city continues to breathe. Somewhere nearby, a door slides open and closes again. Somewhere else, a voice calls out briefly, not loudly enough to travel far. The sound fades into the layered quiet of night activity. This is not the silence of absence. It is the silence of many small things happening without emphasis. Rain begins without drama. At first it is uncertain, a few drops testing the air. Then it settles into a steady fall, light enough to be ignored. Lantern light blurs slightly as paper darkens. Vendors make small adjustments, tilting roofs, shifting positions, continuing on without comment. Food tastes different at night, not because the ingredients change, but because the body receives it differently. Warmth spreads slowly. Hunger recedes without resistance. The mind follows, loosening its grip on the day's concerns. People here are used to this hour. They know how the city behaves when daylight withdraws. Which streets empty first, which remain active, where the air moves and where it stays trapped between walls. Nothing feels dangerous. Nothing feels entirely safe either. It simply feels known. In rooms above the street, mats are unrolled. Lamps are lowered. Someone counts the day's earnings with care, not because they expect surprise, but because counting is part of closure. Outside, the fires burn lower. Pots are scraped clean. Water is poured carefully over coals, releasing a brief hiss before everything settles again. The night does not end suddenly. Thins gradually as exhaustion takes over. This is not a place of legends or warnings. It is a place of repetition, of people who will return to the same corner tomorrow, light the same flame, prepare the same food, and exchange the same quiet words. The comfort comes not from novelty, but from knowing exactly what will happen next. As the rain continues, the city holds itself together, one routine at a time, and slowly, without announcement, attention drifts inward again. Before the night continues, there is one quiet pause. If you find comfort in these slow histories, in voices that do not rush or demand, you can remain here again on another night by subscribing to Midnight History. Nothing changes now. The story continues at the same pace, in the same low light. The warmth of cooking fires and rain-softened streets does not vanish. It fades, slowly, as warmth often does, leaving behind an awareness of enclosed spaces and walls drawn close together. The sense of movement narrows. The open street gives way to interiors, and the night turns inward. In a distant city, far from forests and lantern-lit stalls, houses stand close enough to share heat. Their walls are thick, built not for beauty, but for endurance. Stone holds the day's warmth longer than wood, releasing it reluctantly as the hours pass. Inside, the air is heavy with smoke that never fully leaves, no matter how carefully vents are managed. Light comes from small flames, contained and practical. Oil lamps sit low, their glow dull and uneven, touching only what is nearby. Shadows fill the rest. There is no effort made to brighten corners that are not needed. Darkness is accepted as part of the room. The floors are hard underfoot. Rugs are rare and thin. Most of the comfort here comes not from softness, but from familiarity. Each object has a place because there is little room for anything unnecessary. A table bears the marks of years of use. A bench has been repaired more than once. Nothing is discarded unless it can no longer be made to serve. The smell of the space is constant. Smoke, damp stone, old fabric, and the faint trace of whatever was cooked earlier in the day. It clings to clothing and skin, unnoticed by those who live here. It is the smell of survival rather than comfort. People move carefully in these rooms not because they are afraid, but because they have learned where injury comes from. A misstep in low light, a hand too close to flame, pot lifted without thinking. The body remembers these lessons even when the mind is tired. Outside, the city is quieter now. Not silent, but reduced. The sounds that remain are distant and muted, filtered through stone and night air. Somewhere, a cart moves slowly over uneven ground. Somewhere else, voices rise briefly, then fall again. Nothing presses inward. Water is carried in and set aside for the night. Doors are secured, not against danger so much as against cold. The act is habitual. It requires no thought. Each motion closes the day a little more. Sleeping arrangements are simple. A shared space, a mat unrolled, a blanket drawn close. Privacy is minimal but accepted. Breath and small movements fill the room. The body adjusts, finding a position that will allow rest without effort. Time here is not measured precisely. There is no need to know the exact hour. What matters is whether the fire still holds embers, whether the room has cooled too much, whether sleep has arrived yet. These are the signals that guide the night. Above, smoke drifts slowly toward openings meant for it, staining stone darker over years. Below, the ground remains cold, no matter the season. Between the two, people settle into stillness. This is not a place designed for comfort. It is a place designed to continue. Each night resembles the last closely enough that nothing feels uncertain. The walls do not change. The routines hold. The city endures by repeating itself. As the lamp is lowered, and the flame reduced to a small, steady point, attention fades once more. Thought slows. The room remains, unchanged, holding its shape in the dark. And with nothing left to observe, the night becomes complete. There is no clear moment when sleep arrives. It settles gradually, like dust in still air. The room does not change, but awareness of it grows thinner, less insistent, as if the walls themselves have learned to wait. Breathing evens out. It becomes something that happens without supervision. The body, finally released from the need to remain alert, sinks into the surface beneath it. Muscles loosen in small stages, one after another, as if following a familiar order learned over many nights. The lamp's flame shrinks further, until it is no longer a flame at all, only a suggestion of light clinging to the wick. Shadows soften. The sharp edges of objects lose their definition. What remains is a dim awareness of space, of warmth gathered where bodies lie close, of cold held at a distance by stone and habit. Outside, the city continues without ceremony. A night watch passes somewhere beyond the walls, their presence marked only by a faint sound that never reaches the room clearly enough to demand attention. Water drips steadily from a roof edge. A breeze moves through a narrow street and is gone again. Inside, time stretches. The mind drifts across details without holding on to any of them. The smell of smoke becomes background. The weight of fabric becomes neutral. Even discomfort, when it appears, is dull and unimportant, easily ignored. This is not a place where sleep is deep and uninterrupted, but it is sufficient. It does what is required. At some point, the fire gives up its last warmth. No one notices. The change is too slow to register. The room cools by degrees so small they might as well not exist. Bodies adjust without waking, pulling closer, turning slightly, preserving heat without intention. Dreams, if they come, are simple. Fragments of movement, a remembered sound, the impression of light through smoke. Nothing sharp enough to disturb the stillness. The night holds, and in that holding, nothing more is asked of anyone. The hours move without markers. There is no signal to announce their passing, no change sharp enough to divide one moment from the next. Only a gradual thinning of darkness, so subtle it could be mistaken for imagination. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city shifts slightly. A door opens, then closes again. Footsteps pass at a distance, slower than they were earlier, careful not to disturb what still rests. The sound fades before it fully forms, leaving behind the sense that something has moved on. Inside, the room remains as it was. The air is cooler now, settled and still. Breath rises and falls in uneven patterns, each body keeping its own quiet rhythm. There is no effort to synchronize. Sleep does not require coordination. The stone walls release the last of their stored warmth, reluctantly, as if uncertain whether it is needed elsewhere. The floor holds its chill. The contrast is familiar, long accepted. This is how nights behave here. They withdraw slowly, without apology. Thought drifts in and out, never fully taking shape. Images appear briefly, then dissolve before they can become meaningful. The mind no longer insists on coherence. It allows impressions to pass unexamined, content to remain unoccupied. At some point, a hint of light presses faintly against the edges of shutters and door frames. It is not enough to illuminate anything. It does not yet belong to the day. It simply suggests that darkness is not permanent. No one responds to it. Sleep deepens where it can, thins where it must, adapting to the room and the bodies within it. This is rest shaped by necessity rather than comfort. It does not promise restoration. It offers only continuation. Outside, the city waits. Inside, nothing needs to be done. And so the night carries on, quietly, steadily, without reaching an ending. The night does not resolve itself. It remains stretched, thin and patient, allowing the hours to pass without comment. Inside the stone room, sleep loosens and tightens in cycles. It never fully releases its hold, but it never presses too deeply either. Bodies remain aware of cold, of shared space, of the faint discomfort that comes from resting on surfaces never designed for ease. And still, rest arrives because it must. Breath gathers in the dark, visible only as warmth held briefly before fading again. A shoulder shifts. A leg draws closer to the body's center. These movements happen without waking, guided by instinct rather than thought. The body knows how to preserve itself even when the mind is absent. The walls do not respond. They remain cool and unmoved, indifferent to comfort. Their purpose is simpler. They stand. They separate inside from outside. They hold back weather, sound, and intrusion. Nothing more is expected of them. Somewhere deeper in the city, a sound carries briefly through the night. Could be a door, could be a voice, could be nothing at all. The distinction no longer matters. The mind does not reach for meaning. It lets the sound pass through without resistance. Time continues its quiet work. In these hours, the city is not productive. No trade takes place. No authority asserts itself. No decision is made that cannot wait. What remains is maintenance. Fires kept small. Doors kept closed. Bodies kept warm enough to survive until light returns. This is the rhythm most lives follow. Not the rhythm of great events, but the rhythm of endurance. Night after night, the same sequence repeats with minor variations. The same rooms, the same walls, the same gestures made half asleep. Above the rooftops, the sky begins to change in ways too subtle to describe. Darkness thins unevenly. It does not retreat all at once. It loosens its grip gradually, allowing pale suggestion to gather where black once held firm. No one marks the moment. Sleep responds slowly. It resists being disturbed. Dreams linger longer than they should, folding into one another without structure. Waking thought remains distant, muffled, unimportant. The city holds its breath without realizing it. The room remains unchanged, even as awareness drifts in slow circles around it. Nothing new enters. Nothing leaves. The space holds as it has always held, indifferent to the passage of individual nights. Sleep loosens again briefly, not enough to wake anyone fully, only enough to allow a shallow awareness to surface and sink back down. The body registers cold along the edges, warmth where contact is shared, and then releases these observations without forming thought. There is no need to adjust further. What can be done has already been done. In the darkness, time becomes less linear. Minutes do not follow one another in a clear sequence. Instead, they seem to gather in clusters, then dissolve. The night stretches itself out, making room for nothing in particular. Somewhere nearby, water shifts in a container as the air cools. The sound is faint, barely distinct from the general quiet. Passes without reaction. Outside, stone streets lie empty, holding the memory of footsteps from earlier hours. Moisture clings to their surfaces, reflecting nothing. This is the portion of the night that feels longest. Not because anything happens, but because nothing interrupts it. The world seems to pause here, suspended between what has ended and what has not yet begun. Within the walls, the small collection of objects remains exactly where it was left. A cup rests on its side. A tool leans against stone. A folded garment waits to be worn again. These things do not belong to the night or the day. They simply persist. Breathing deepens, then slows. It settles into a rhythm shaped by cold air and fatigue. Each inhale is quiet. Each exhale is quieter still. The sound does not travel. It stays close, absorbed by fabric and shadow. The fire, long reduced to embers, offers no more warmth. It no longer crackles or shifts. Its presence is suggested only by a faint, dry scent in the air. No one tends it. There is nothing left to tend. Outside the city walls, the land rests in a state of stillness that has nothing to do with peace. It is simply inactive, waiting. Fields remain dark and undefined. Paths dissolve into the surrounding ground. The horizon offers no shape. Inside the city, even those who are awake move cautiously now. Their tasks are minimal, their steps measured. The night is not a time for change, only for preservation. Sleep deepens again unevenly. One body shifts closer to another. A hand finds fabric. A shoulder presses against stone. These movements happen without thought, driven by habit and necessity. The mind does not observe them. It remains distant. Thought itself feels heavy, as if it must travel farther to form. Ideas rise slowly and fall apart before they can become clear. Memory loosens its grip. The present moment expands, filling whatever space attention once occupied. Somewhere far away, A sound marks the passing of an hour, but it does not carry here. The room remains untouched by it. Time passes without confirmation. The darkness lightens slightly, almost imperceptibly. It does not brighten. It thins. The difference is subtle enough to be ignored. The night still belongs to itself. The body remains at rest, suspended between deeper sleep and shallow awareness. There is no urgency to move in either direction. The space allows this state to continue. This is how most nights end. Not with a conclusion, but with a gradual release of attention. The world does not announce its return. It waits for readiness. And for now, readiness does not arrive. The room holds its shape as the night continues to thin, slowly, without commitment. The darkness no longer feels complete, yet it has not released its hold either. It lingers in corners, in folds of fabric, along the seams where stone meets wood. Sleep shifts again, not suddenly, but in a gentle rearranging. Awareness rises just enough to notice the position of the body, the pressure of the ground beneath it, the weight of shared air. Then it settles back, uninterested in staying present for long. Breath moves in slow patterns, uneven but steady. Each inhale gathers the coolness of the room. Each exhale releases a faint warmth that disappears almost immediately. The exchange continues without thought, without effort, sustaining itself quietly. The walls remain unchanged. They have witnessed countless nights like this one, each nearly identical to the last. They do not respond to sound or movement. Their purpose is fulfilled simply by standing, by separating what is inside from what remains outside. Somewhere in the city, a hinge creaks softly. The sound travels briefly through narrow passages, then dissolves. No one reacts. The night absorbs it easily as it absorbs everything else. Objects in the room remain undisturbed. A bowl sits where it was placed hours ago. A piece of clothing lies folded, untouched. These items do not belong to this moment alone. They exist across many nights, many mornings, repeating their quiet presence without change. Time stretches further. It does not move forward in a straight line. It expands outward, filling the space with long intervals of nothing at all. This is the hour where the distinction between moments begins to blur. The city itself feels suspended. Trade has ceased. Conversation has ended. Even animals remain still. What movement exists now serves only maintenance, not progress. Fires are kept low. Doors remain shut. Bodies remain at rest. Within the room, sleep deepens unevenly. One body turns slightly, seeking warmth. Another remains motionless, breath shallow and slow. These variations do not matter. The night allows all of them equally. Thought drifts without anchor. Images form briefly, then dissolve before they can become memories. A fragment of sound, a vague impression of light, nothing sharp enough to claim attention. The faintest suggestion of dawn presses against the outer edges of the city. It does not announce itself. It does not brighten the room. It exists only as a subtle change in the quality of darkness, a thinning rather than a retreat. No one responds. The body remains heavy, comfortable in its stillness. Muscles stay relaxed. Joints remain loose. The need to move does not arise. There is nothing to prepare for yet. Outside, the stone streets hold moisture from the night air. They reflect no light, offering no guidance. The city waits, patient and unhurried. Inside, the air feels settled. Smoke from earlier hours has dispersed into the fabric of the room, leaving only a faint trace. The smell is familiar enough to be unnoticed. It signals continuity rather than change. Sleep does not end. It loosens and tightens, adjusting itself gently, like fabric shifting with breath. Awareness remains distant, uninterested in returning fully. This is the final stretch of night, though it does not feel final. Carries no sense of completion. It simply continues until something else quietly replaces it. For now, nothing does. The night remains settled, refusing to resolve itself into anything new. It stretches quietly, allowing the hours to move through it without resistance, without markers, without consequence. Within the room, sleep loosens its grip only slightly, enough for the body to register itself and then forget again. There is an awareness of weight, of pressure where the body meets the ground, of fabric resting against skin. None of it demands attention. It is noted, then released. Breathing continues at its own pace. Slow, uneven, steady enough to be trusted. The sound barely exists beyond the body itself, absorbed by the surrounding air and stone. Each breath feels identical to the last, indistinguishable, unremarkable. The walls stand unchanged. Their surfaces hold the coolness of night, offering no comfort, but no threat either. They do what they have always done. They enclose, they separate, they endure. Somewhere nearby, a small sound moves through the dark, perhaps a shift of weight in another room, perhaps the settling of wood as temperatures change. The distinction no longer matters. The sound fades before it can form meaning. Time expands again, stretching thin and wide. It no longer feels like a sequence. It feels like a condition, something the room exists within rather than passes through. Outside, the city rests in fragments. Narrow streets remain empty, their surfaces dull and dark. Corners that once held voices now hold only air. Doors stay closed. Windows show no light. The city is present, but inactive. Inside, the objects of the room remain as they were left. Nothing has shifted. Nothing has fallen. Each item waits without expectation, ready to resume its purpose when needed again. Sleep deepens, then loosens, then deepens once more. It does not progress in a straight line. It circles gently, repeating itself. The body responds without waking, adjusting subtly to preserve warmth and ease. Thought appears briefly, then dissolves. A shape, a sensation, a memory that never completes itself. The mind does not insist. It allows these fragments to pass without question. The darkness thins further, though the room remains dim. The change is so slight it could go unnoticed entirely. The night does not end. It simply becomes less dense. No one stirs in response. The air inside the room feels settled now, unmoving. Smoke from earlier hours has long since dispersed. What remains is a neutral stillness, neither heavy nor light. It holds without pressing. Outside the walls, the city's edges soften. The boundary between structure and open space blurs in the low light. Fields remain undefined. Paths remain indistinct. Everything waits. The body remains at rest, suspended between deeper sleep and shallow awareness. Muscles stay loose. The urge to move does not arrive. There is no reason to prepare for anything yet. Somewhere far away, a sound suggests movement beginning elsewhere, but it does not travel this far. The room remains untouched by it. This portion of the night feels endless, not because it is long, but because nothing interrupts it. There is no signal to move forward, no cue to change state. Sleep holds. The room continues to exist exactly as it is, unchanged by the passing hours. The walls stand. The air settles. The darkness thins by degrees too small to measure. And still, nothing is required. The hours continue to pass without insisting on recognition. They move through the room quietly, leaving no mark behind them, asking nothing in return. The body remains settled, heavy in a way that feels deliberate rather than forced. Limbs rest where they have found balance. The surface beneath gives no softness, yet the body has adapted to it over countless nights. Discomfort, when it appears, is dull and familiar, easily folded back into stillness. Breath carries on, slow and reliable. Cool air enters. Slightly warmer air leaves. The pattern repeats without variation. There is no thought attached to it. Breathing has returned to something older than intention. The room stays dim, its edges softened by the thinning darkness. Corners lose their sharpness. Shapes blur into one another. Objects exist more as suggestions than as forms, known by memory rather than sight. The walls continue their quiet work. They hold. They separate. They offer no commentary on the night unfolding within them. Their surface bears the marks of time, darkened by smoke, worn smooth by years of contact. These marks remain invisible now, but they are present all the same. Outside, the city lies suspended. Streets remain empty. Doorways stay closed. Even the sounds that once defined the place have withdrawn, leaving only a low, indistinct quiet behind. It is not silence, but it is close enough. Sleep shifts again, gently. Awareness drifts closer to the surface, then recedes. The body registers a slight chill, a subtle pressure where stone meets skin, then adjusts without waking. A shoulder turns. A leg bends slightly. The movements are minimal, just enough to restore balance. Thought does not fully return. It circles at a distance, unwilling to take shape. Fragments appear and fade before they can be held. There is no effort to follow them. The mind remains content to remain unfocused. Time no longer feels like something that moves forward. It feels like something that surrounds the room, pressing gently from all sides. The night does not hurry. It does not promise resolution. Somewhere beyond the walls, the faintest suggestion of movement begins to gather. Not sound exactly, but the sense that the city will not remain this way forever. The impression is vague and easily ignored. Inside, the air feels cooler now, settled into a steady temperature. The warmth held earlier by stone and bodies has evened out. Nothing changes quickly enough to be noticed. Everything adjusts gradually. The fire, long extinguished, offers no sign of itself beyond a dry scent lingering in fabric and stone. This work is done. It will not return until someone chooses to wake and tend it again. The darkness continues to thin. Not enough to illuminate the room, only enough to suggest that the night is losing its weight. The change remains subtle, easily overlooked by those still at rest. No one stirs in response. Sleep remains uneven but persistent. It does not deepen further. It does not release its hold. It simply continues, doing what is required and no more. The room holds its stillness. The city remains quiet. The night stretches on, patient and unhurried, allowing rest to remain exactly where it is. The night continues to thin in place, as if it has decided not to leave all at once. It loosens its weight gradually, allowing the room to remain suspended between darkness and whatever comes next. Inside, the body remains settled into rest that is neither deep nor light. It exists in a state of balance, aware enough to remain comfortable, distant enough to avoid thought. Muscles stay relaxed. The spine rests where it has found ease. Nothing asks to be adjusted. Breath continues in slow, unremarkable cycles. Each one follows the last without variation. The sound is barely present, absorbed by fabric, stone, and still air. It does not echo. It does not travel. It remains contained. The room feels smaller now, not because the walls have moved, but because awareness has narrowed. The edges of the space fade further into shadow. Only the immediate area around the body feels defined, and even that definition is soft. Objects remain where they were left, unchanged. A vessel sits empty, its purpose temporarily forgotten. A tool rests against the wall, waiting without urgency. These things have no awareness of time. They simply persist. The walls continue their quiet endurance. Their surface holds the memory of countless nights like this one, each passing without ceremony. They have sheltered sleep before. They will do so again. There is nothing remarkable about this night to distinguish it from the others. Outside, the city remains subdued. Any movement that begins elsewhere does not reach this room. Sound dissipates before it can gather strength. Streets remain dull and empty, holding no reflection, no direction. Sleep drifts slightly closer, then eases back again. It does not advance in stages. It settles wherever it finds space. The body responds automatically, adjusting posture by small degrees, preserving warmth without waking. Thought remains distant. It appears only as a faint suggestion, a shadow of something that might have been formed if the mind were fully awake. But the effort is not made. Attention remains unfocused, content to stay where it is. Time stretches further, losing its edges. The distinction between moments blurs until it no longer feels necessary to separate one from another. The night becomes a single extended interval, smooth and uninterrupted. The air inside the room feels stable now, settled into its final temperature. Cool but not biting, still but not heavy. It holds without pressing inward. The darkness continues to lighten by degrees too small to notice. It does not brighten the space. It simply becomes less complete. Shadows soften further. Corners dissolve into uniform dimness. No one responds to this change. Sleep maintains its hold, steady and sufficient. It does not deepen dramatically. It does not release suddenly. It remains exactly where it needs to be. The room stays quiet. The city remains distant. The night carries on without signaling an end, allowing rest to continue undisturbed. The night remains in place, no longer heavy, but not yet lifted. It settles into a thinner form, spread evenly through the room, touching everything without drawing attention to itself. Inside, rest continues without interruption. The body stays where it is, neither sinking deeper nor rising toward wakefulness. There is a sense of suspension, as if the body has been set gently into the night and left there to float. Muscles remain loose. The tension that once held the day together has dissolved completely. Breathing moves on, slow and repetitive. Each breath mirrors the one before it so closely that they become indistinguishable. The body no longer monitors the process, trusts it to continue on its own as it always has. The room feels still in a way that suggests permanence. Nothing creaks, nothing shifts. Even the air seems settled, content to remain where it is. The walls hold their position, dark and solid, unresponsive to the passing hours. In the dimness, the boundaries of the space soften further. The line between wall and shadow disappears. The floor becomes an indistinct surface rather than a defined plane. Objects lose their edges and merge with the darkness around them, present only as remembered forms. Outside the room, the city continues its slow withdrawal from night. This change does not arrive as sound or light. It arrives as absence. The absence of earlier quiet noises. The absence of deep darkness. The absence of the sense that nothing else exists beyond this moment. Still, nothing presses inward. Sleep adjusts again subtly. The body shifts just enough to restore comfort, guided by instinct rather than awareness. A shoulder settles. A leg relaxes further. The movement ends before it can register as action. Thought does not return. It remains distant, scattered, uninterested in coherence. Ideas do not form. Memory does not assert itself. The mind drifts, content to remain unoccupied. Time now feels wide and slow. It does not pull forward. It does not push back. It simply exists, surrounding the room like a condition rather than a sequence. The night no longer feels like something that will end. It feels like something that holds. The air cools slightly, then stabilizes again. The change is so gradual it passes unnoticed. Fabric rests against skin. Stone rests beneath it. The balance remains intact. Somewhere far beyond the walls, the world begins to prepare itself for movement, but that preparation remains distant and abstract. It does not intrude. It does not announce itself. It waits its turn. Inside, rest remains sufficient. It does not promise renewal or clarity. It offers only continuation, which is enough. The darkness continues to thin, losing its density without brightening. The room remains dim, unchanged in character. Shadows soften further until they no longer feel separate from the space itself. No one responds. The body remains at rest, held gently by the night. There is no urgency to wake, no signal to move, no expectation placed on the coming hours. The room endures. The city remains quiet. The night stretches on, calm and unremarkable, allowing sleep to remain exactly where it is, undisturbed. The night continues in its quiet thinning, never quite leaving, never quite arriving at something else. It settles into a state that feels stable, as though it could remain this way indefinitely without consequence. Inside the room, rest holds steady. The body does not move now. It has found a position that asks nothing further of it. Weight is evenly distributed. Muscles remain loose. There is no signal from the body that requires response. Comfort here is not softness, but familiarity. Breathing remains slow and even. The air moves in and out with little effort, barely stirring the stillness around it. Each breath fades before it can become sound. The room absorbs it easily as it absorbs everything else. The walls continue to stand, unchanged and unremarkable. They do not echo. They do not amplify. They simply exist, holding the space together without comment. Their presence feels constant enough to be forgotten. In the low light, the room has lost most of its definition. Shapes exist only as faint contrasts against darkness. The floor blends into shadow. Corners dissolve into the surrounding dimness. Objects are no longer seen as separate things, only as a general sense of occupation. Outside, the city remains distant. Whatever movement begins elsewhere does not reach this place. Streets remain quiet. Doorways remain closed. The night still belongs to itself here. Sleep settles into a steady rhythm. It does not deepen dramatically. It does not lighten suddenly. It remains consistent, sufficient, unremarkable. Awareness stays far from the surface, unwilling to rise. Thought does not form. The mind remains unfocused, drifting gently without direction. If images appear, they do not linger. If memories surface, they fade before they can take shape. Nothing holds attention long enough to matter. Time no longer feels measured. It feels expansive, spread out evenly across the room. The distinction between moments has softened to the point of irrelevance. The night has become a single, continuous presence. The air remains cool, settled, neutral. Fabric rests where it has fallen. Stone remains firm beneath it. No adjustments are needed. Everything holds. The darkness continues to lose its density, thinning further without brightening. The room does not change in character. It remains dim, quiet, enclosed. The shift is gentle enough to be ignored completely. No one stirs in response. Somewhere far away, the world continues its slow preparation for morning. But that preparation remains abstract here. It does not intrude. It does not announce itself. It waits beyond the walls. Inside, rest continues uninterrupted. The body remains still. The mind remains distant. The room remains unchanged. The night stretches on, calm and predictable, offering nothing new, asking for nothing in return, allowing sleep to remain exactly where it is. The room remains settled as the night reaches its quietest balance. Nothing presses forward. Nothing pulls away. The hours seem content to remain where they are, stretched thin and evenly distributed through the darkness. Inside, the body stays at rest, held in a position that has become familiar enough to disappear from awareness. There is no urge to turn, no signal to adjust. Weight rests where it should. Muscles remain loose, no longer holding the memory of effort or strain. Breathing continues in a slow, dependable rhythm. Cool air enters. Slight warmth leaves. The exchange is steady and unremarkable, happening without supervision. Each breath blends into the next, indistinguishable, uncounted. The walls remain still, unchanged by the passage of time. Their surfaces are dark and cool, shaped by years of smoke and touch. They do not reflect sound or light in any meaningful way. They simply remain doing what they were built to do. The room feels enclosed now in a way that is not restrictive. It is contained. The boundaries are close enough to be reassuring, distant enough to be ignored. Nothing from outside presses inward. Nothing from inside seeks to escape. Objects remain exactly where they were left. A vessel sits unused. A folded cloth rests against stone. These things have waited through many nights before, and they will wait through many more. They do not register the passage of hours. Sleep deepens slightly, then settles again. Awareness drifts closer to the surface for a moment, just long enough to register warmth and coolness, then sinks back down. The movement is smooth, unforced, guided by habit rather than thought. Thought does not take shape. The mind remains quiet, unoccupied, uninterested in forming images or holding memory. If impressions arise, they pass without resistance, dissolving before they can be examined. Time continues without markers. There is no sound to divide one moment from the next, no light to signal change. The night feels extended, continuous, as if it could hold this shape indefinitely. Outside the room, the city remains subdued. Any early movement that begins elsewhere does not reach this place. Streets remain quiet. Walls and roofs hold the darkness close, keeping it contained. The air inside the room feels stable now, cool and still. It no longer shifts noticeably. Fabric rests where it has fallen. Stone holds its temperature. Everything has settled into its final arrangement for the night. The darkness continues to thin, almost imperceptibly. It does not brighten the space. It simply becomes less dense, less complete. Shadows soften further, losing their edges. No one responds. The body remains heavy with rest, suspended between deeper sleep and waking awareness. There is no urgency to rise, no anticipation of what comes next. The present moment stretches, wide and undemanding. Somewhere far beyond the walls, the world prepares itself for change, but that preparation remains distant and abstract. It does not intrude here. It does not announce itself. It waits. Inside, the room remains quiet and unchanged. The city stays distant. The night continues, calm and predictable, allowing sleep to remain exactly where it is, undisturbed. The night holds steady, balanced between what it has been and what it will slowly become. There is no clear boundary to mark this stage. It simply exists, settled and unremarkable. Inside the room, rest remains undisturbed. The body no longer searches for comfort. It has accepted what the space provides and released any expectation of ease beyond that. Weight stays evenly distributed. Muscles remain loose, no longer aware of themselves. Breathing continues in its quiet cycle. Each breath enters softly, leaves even more softly. The air barely stirs. The room absorbs the movement without response, as it has learned to do over countless nights. The walls remain unchanged, holding their shape and purpose without variation. They do not warm or cool noticeably now. They have reached a steady state, one that feels permanent enough to fade from awareness entirely. The room's contents remain indistinct. Objects exist only as a sense of presence rather than form. A surface where something rests, a shadow where something leans. Memory supplies the rest, filling in details that are no longer visible. Sleep drifts slightly closer again, deepening by small degrees. Awareness recedes further, leaving behind only the most basic sensations. Coolness at the edges, warmth where bodies remain close. Even these sensations soften as the mind loses interest in them. Time continues without structure. There is no progression to follow, no sequence to observe. The night feels extended, uniform, uninterrupted. It no longer feels like something that is passing. It feels like something that simply is. Outside, the city remains quiet. Any early stirrings remain distant and muted, unable to penetrate the thick stillness that surrounds the room. Streets stay dark. Walls hold their silence. The city waits without urgency. Inside, the air remains still. Smoke from earlier hours has fully settled into the surfaces of the room, leaving only a faint, familiar trace. The scent is neither strong nor unpleasant. It is simply part of the space. Sleep settles into a steady hold. It no longer shifts or adjusts. It remains consistent, sufficient, unremarkable. The body responds by staying still, conserving warmth and energy without conscious effort. Thought does not return. The mind remains distant, unfocused, uninterested in forming images or connections. If dreams appear, they are shallow and fleeting, dissolving before they can be remembered. The darkness thins further, almost to the point of neutrality. It does not yet resemble daylight. It simply loses some of its depth. The room remains dim, unchanged in character. No one stirs. The body remains at rest, heavy and calm. There is no anticipation of waking, no preparation for movement. The present moment stretches comfortably, holding everything in place. Somewhere beyond the walls, change gathers slowly, but it remains out of reach here. The room does not acknowledge it. The city does not respond to it yet. For now, the night continues exactly as it is. The night continues without acknowledging the distance it has already traveled. It does not feel close to ending, nor does it feel endless. It simply remains, settled into its quiet shape. Inside the room, rest holds firm. The body has grown still in a way that feels final for the night, no longer shifting or adjusting. There is no discomfort sharp enough to be noticed, no sensation distinct enough to call attention to itself. What remains is a general sense of presence, softened and distant. Breathing moves on, slow and steady. Each breath follows the last so closely that they blur together. The sound is barely perceptible, absorbed by stone, fabric, and air. It exists only within the body itself, unnoticed and uncounted. The walls remain unchanged, holding their place with quiet certainty. They do not respond to subtle changes in light or temperature. They do not reflect sound. They stand, as they always have, indifferent to the passing of hours. The room feels enclosed in a way that is no longer registered as confinement. It is simply the space that exists. Boundaries are no longer measured. Corners fade completely into shadow. The floor becomes an idea rather than a surface. Objects remain unseen but known. Their presence is implied rather than observed. A place where something rests. A shape remembered rather than perceived. Nothing demands recognition. Sleep deepens slightly, not dramatically, but enough to dull awareness further. Sensations soften. The distinction between body and space becomes less clear. Warmth and coolness blend into a single, neutral state. Time loses any remaining structure. It no longer feels divided into moments. It feels wide and continuous, stretching evenly in all directions. The night has no milestones left to pass. Outside, the city remains quiet. Any early movement stays distant, muffled by stone and darkness. Streets remain empty. Roofs hold the night close. Nothing presses inward. Inside, the air remains cool and still. It no longer shifts or settles. It simply exists, filling the room without movement. Fabric rests where it has fallen. Stone remains firm beneath it. Thought does not return. The mind remains disengaged, content to remain unfocused. If images arise, they dissolve immediately, leaving no trace. Memory does not assert itself. Awareness remains shallow and calm. The darkness continues to thin by degrees too small to measure. It does not brighten the room. It only becomes less complete, less weighted. Shadows soften until they no longer feel separate from the space around them. No one responds to this change. The body remains heavy with rest, suspended in a state that requires no effort to maintain. There is no urgency to wake, no anticipation of what comes next. The present moment holds without pressure. Somewhere beyond the walls, the world prepares for movement, but that preparation remains distant and abstract. It does not intrude. It does not announce itself. It waits. Inside, the room remains unchanged. The city stays quiet. The night continues, calm and predictable, allowing sleep to remain exactly where it is, undisturbed. The night does not change its posture. It remains where it is, neither advancing nor withdrawing, holding the room in a state that feels settled enough to be permanent. Inside, rest continues without interruption. The body remains still, no longer adjusting, no longer responding to minor shifts in temperature or pressure. It has accepted the conditions of the space fully. What might once have felt uncomfortable has faded into neutrality, absorbed into the background of sleep. Breathing moves on quietly. Each breath follows the same shallow arc, entering and leaving without effort. The sound never leaves the body. It does not echo or travel. It exists only as a gentle internal rhythm, steady and dependable. The room itself feels suspended. The walls do not seem closer or farther away. They simply exist, dark and solid, holding the space together without emphasis. Their presence is no longer noticed. It has become part of the night itself. Objects remain unseen and unconsidered. They occupy the room without asserting themselves. A surface where something rests, a shadow where something leans. Their forms are no longer important. Their function can wait. Sleep deepens slightly, then holds. Awareness drifts farther from the surface, leaving behind only the most basic sense of being contained, of being supported. Sensation dulls. Thought dissolves before it can gather shape. Time feels wide now. It does not move forward in steps. It spreads evenly without division, without direction. The night no longer feels like a passage. It feels like a condition the room exists within. Outside the walls, the city remains quiet enough to feel distant, almost unreal. Whatever movement begins elsewhere stays far away, unable to reach this enclosed stillness. Streets remain dark. Roofs hold the thinning night close. Inside, the air stays cool and unmoving. Fabric rests where it has fallen. Stone holds its temperature without fluctuation. Nothing shifts quickly enough to be noticed. Everything has settled into balance. Thought does not return. The mind remains disengaged, uninterested in images or memory. If impressions appear, they fade immediately, leaving no trace behind them. There is no effort to follow them. Attention remains diffuse and calm. The darkness continues to thin, almost imperceptibly. It does not brighten the room or change its character. It simply loses some of its weight. Shadows soften until they blend fully into the surrounding space. No one responds. The body remains heavy with rest, suspended in a state that asks nothing further of it. There is no urgency to wake, no anticipation of movement. The present moment holds steady, wide and undemanding. Somewhere beyond the walls, the world prepares itself for change, but that preparation remains abstract here. It does not intrude. It does not announce itself. It waits beyond reach. Inside, the room remains unchanged. The city stays distant. The night continues, calm and predictable, allowing sleep to remain exactly where it is, undisturbed, unbroken, and free to continue on its own.